And welcome to take two of our first edition of Let's Talk Teens. This was actually initiated by Elisabeth Stitt, one of our co-presenters today. Back in probably August or September, she reached out to Deborah and to me saying, hey, there's a conference coming up being hosted by the Institute of Child Psychology, and it's focusing on mental health and mental health awareness for youth. Are you interested in attending together, kind of like dividing and conquering? And we said yes. And then we said, all right, well, what do we want to do from there? We all work with teens in various capacities. We'll explain that kind of as we go. And we said, hey, we want to take some of what we learned from that event and our background knowledge. And we each just picked our own topics of what we felt was relevant based on what we were hearing from families in our respective realms, and put this together. We did have an event yesterday, so that's why I say today is take two of the same thing. We are recording it, so if something comes up and you need to jet or you need to head out and come back, we are going to be sending links to the recordings, and we are in talks about possibly doing it again with some different topics in a couple of months or such down the road. So stay tuned, we'll keep you posted. But without further ado, Elisabeth is going to kick us off today. And she's a veteran middle schooler. She is a mom and a stepmom. And so we had some really engaging conversations yesterday about that as well. So if that's relevant, definitely bring those up. But by way of an official biography, when you want to raise happy, healthy, and productive kids who are prepared for whatever life throws at them, Elisabeth is your go-to parenting coach and expert. Kids don't come with an operating manual. So if you think you're supposed to just know how to parent or that it's like magically built into your DNA, unfortunately, that's just not the case. With more than 50,000 hours of working with kids and parents to support her in her work, Elisabeth can guide parents through pretty much any situation. Parenting is tough enough under normal circumstances, and it's a skill. It can be taught, it can be learned, and it can be practiced. Author of Parenting as a Second Language and a longtime teacher with the Redwood City School District in California, Elisabeth brings more than 25 years of experience working with kids of all ages to the work that she does with her parents. Through her talks, workshops, and webinars, Elisabeth shines her warmth and wisdom with parents all over the world. So without further ado, Miss Elisabeth Stitt. In California, the farthest west of the three of us.
Exactly, yeah. And are you in Colorado too? Anna, are you in Colorado?
I am in Indiana.
Indiana. That's Central Time Zone. Mm-hmm. Oh, so once again, we're well represented in time. That's good. I like that. That's fun. Clarissa's going to share the slide deck.
We should be good, yeah?
Yeah. So, my piece today is engaging your teens as critical thinkers. And honestly, this used to be one of the things that America was really known for, that we were innovative, we were creative, we were the thinkers. Other countries who might have had higher test scores in math, for example, would be great computational, great engineers, great detail people, could do exactly what you told them to do. And as we began to get worried that more and more jobs would go towards Asia and India, the school system shifted and we became more of that part of the world modeled in our education system. And so we began doing a lot more drill and kill, a lot more cramming of facts down kids' throats. And that's why homework moved earlier and earlier and earlier and earlier. And the result of all this is that parents felt this anxiety about jobs moving away and began to take a tighter grip on their kids' learning and began to micromanage everything that their kids were doing and how they were doing it. As a result, we've left less and less on our kids' shoulders to figure out, as we have taken on more and more of the responsibility of scaffolding things and chunking things out so that kids only have to engage with a piece right in front of them. Now, this is a hard balance because there are some kids who really need the scaffolding and they need the help. And so when teachers break assignments down and really say, this is part A, this is part B, this is part C, this is how you do part A, here's subpart 1, 2, and 3, it helps kids to succeed. It helps them to feel successful, particularly like kids with ADHD and some other learning disabilities. But the pendulum swung too far, seriously. And so we went from not giving them any support or scaffolding and just saying, here's the end product, here's what you have to do, now you go do it, to saying, here are all the tiny micro pieces along the way, and this is when it's due, and I'm going to check and I'm going to correct, and mom and dad are going to correct and check. And so our kids are not as creative as they used to be. They're not as innovative as they used to be. They don't have that ability as much to look into a situation and to say, oh, this is how I might solve this. Like, oh, that looks like that's a problem. That doesn't look right. This is how I might solve that. So that's why my emphasis today is on how do we do that? How do we engage our critical thinkers? Okay, step 1 is to encourage independence. And again, if you think of what were the kinds of things that you were doing independently when you were young, it's probably very different than what you are allowing your child to do. One example is just how far afield do we let our kids get from us, right? They are physically dependent on us. And honestly, after this year of COVID and all being in together, that is going to be the norm for them. They are going to be so used to being right next to us that they are going to have very big challenges in expanding their physical reach from us. And this even comes to the point of like not being willing to go to the other side of the store to get something. Like, oh no, I'll just wait for you. Could you go to the far corner of the store, please, and pick up the deli meat that we need for lunch this week? Oh, I'll just wait for you. That might feel like a lack of motivation or a lack of willingness to please. I suspect it's more that you've never walked me there specifically and showed me specifically how to do it. And I've never walked to the other side of the store by myself. So I don't know. That doesn't feel comfortable. Okay. So when we stop telling our kids what to do, they begin to have to figure stuff out on their own. And this really can go from very little things like what's the next assignment. I know we have some tutors on the call today, and I have sat with students and they are like, I practically have to lift the pencil and put it in their hand and lift their hand and put it to the paper. There's sort of no self-efficacy or self-sense of getting stuff done. So instead of telling your kids what to do, what do we do? Step 2. We want to start to model how are we thinking, right? We've been scaffolding and doing a lot of thinking for them, but we haven't been doing any of the metacognition with them. We haven't been talking to them about how we're approaching a project or what strategy we are using for success. And the fact of the matter is that we have lots of strategies for success that have become so automatic, we don't even recognize them as strategies for success anymore. And then we turn around and we kind of look at our kid and we go like, why can't you do this? Or why don't you do that? So here's a great example. Here's an example of my father did not have a strategies for success when it came to getting out the door in the morning. And he would go roaring through the house going, where is my GD keys? where's my wallet? Where's my idiot book? Which is what he used to call his appointment book, is, you know, the good old days before there were iPhones with our calendar on them. And my experience every morning was like, oh, who can find it? Who can find it? Get it. So instead of his walking out the door being like, love you, kiss, kiss, hug, have a great day, go do great things, kiddo, it was this drama. And it didn't occur to me until much later. Why the heck didn't he have a drawer or a shelf or a hook or a basket, so that when he walked in the door, the wallet and the keys and the idiot book all went in some place, and the same place every day, so that he could find it in the morning? And possibly he gave me the gift of teaching me that strategies are really needed, because when you don't have them, life is a lot more chaotic and a lot more stressful, and we get nervous and we don't know how to approach things. So when we model our thinking out loud, like, oh, I'm going to have a drawer. It's in the key drawer. It's in the, it's in the go out the door drawer, whatever you call it. I always call it the key drawer, even though I put everything that's not key there too. That also has to go out the door. But you tell your kids, right? It always goes back in this drawer, right? And when in that odd moment that the phone is ringing as you're bringing the groceries in, the key doesn't go automatically there because you're trying to answer the phone as you put down the groceries, and then later your keys are on the counter. You pick the keys up and you go, oh no, these belong in the key drawer so that I can find them when I go out the door in the morning. So I'm articulating my strategy out loud so that the kids know what is making me successful at getting out the door early in the morning. I'm just curious, what are some of your favorite strategies for systems, routines, for making things more smooth, pleasant, easy? I guess I have to open the chat. Nobody did.
Elisabeth, John here. I don't have any teens in my house anymore, but I have learned within the last couple of months to do exactly what you're talking about. I knew where the keys were to the car, but I would frequently leave the house without my wallet and my license. So now the wallet stays with the keys, right by the front door.
Awesome. And now we have to add masks, right?
Exactly.
We have a whole new thing to like remember and to make automatic.
Right.
And so, yeah, exactly.
The key thing is a big one for me. I am notorious for getting ready to run out the house and not knowing where my keys are, or not knowing where I left my wallet or my purse or whatever. And so I didn't learn these things as a kid, and it sounds ridiculous. It wasn't something that was my habit when I was a kid or even in college. And so it's been the same thing. It's hang the keys by the door. And I have a key in my bedroom where my purse, or a hook in my bedroom where my purse goes with my wallet and everything in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Anna, I love that. We have a bench with cubbies in our entry. Our kids leave everything there. Then they plug their computers in the office. And that's what we really want for our kids. We want the systems and the routines to be so automatic that it frees up their thinking for other things. But it also will give them models to transfer to other situations. So, as we talk to them about how we're organizing things, we are teaching them to think, oh, like, how could this be done? How could this be organized? All right, step 3. Okay, so how do we get from just modeling for them to actually getting them into motion themselves? We ask open-ended questions with the expectation that they are going to develop their own strategies for success. And my very favorite question for that is, what's your plan for that? one great advantage of this is that it cuts down on our nagging. So, and it puts the project, the work, the whatever it is into their wheelhouse and off of our plate. So Clarissa, I seem to remember that you have a book report on Friday. What's your plan for that?
I don't know.
Oh. If you did know, what would your plan be?
I guess I got to read the book.
It's a great first step. What's your plan for reading the book?
I don't know, because I don't know where my book is. I guess I should probably find it.
Sounds like a plan. Okay, nice, thank you. Good jumping in there, Clarissa. What I really want you to notice in that exchange was two things. One, how long I waited. Now I'm used to waiting that long. I've trained myself, but to you, it may have felt like an eternity. Like, come on, let's go. We're learning something. Tell me the next thing that it is. The other thing is that I didn't rescue her. And I didn't lecture her. So one of the advantages to helping our kids develop their own strategies for success is we don't waste any of our parenting collateral on stupid stuff, right? Our connection is our biggest key to having an open relationship that flows and has respect with our kids. And that allows for the fun part of being a family, right? When our kids feel connected, they are in flow, they are cooperative. When we are nagging them, that's not usually when they feel connected. So when we put it on their shoulders and we just ask, what's your plan for that? I literally like count to 10 or 20 or 30 in my head in order to myself to do it. And I will share with you that I'm glad that I learned as a teacher. So as a teacher, so you might have noticed I speak quickly. In my household, I come from a household of people who talk fast. And you know what? In my house, it's perfectly okay for one person to talk and the other person to start talking before the other person stops talking. And we are fast processors and we have no problem with that. We could totally handle 2 or 3 people talking at once. Well, you can imagine that did not work very well in a classroom setting because I would be discussing a novel and I would be saying like, what was the character's motivation in this scene? What do you think? Yeah, you're right about that, Joe. What do you think? Uh-huh, yeah, I got that, good. And it was great for me. I was having a great conversation, but I wasn't letting kids do their own thinking. I wasn't letting them fully develop their ideas. And so I learned 2 tricks. The first trick was, I want to hear about the character's motivation in that scene. And I'm going to give you a minute to think about it. No, put your hand down. I'm giving everyone a minute to think about it. And then I would look at the clock. And when I first started doing this, it felt like 3 decades had passed before the clock would come around to the top. And then I would ask the question. And what that did was it meant that every single child in the room had had time to actually form an answer in their head. Now, I know there are some kids who formulate answers by talking out loud, but everybody begins to think about your question. So when we don't jump in with the answer, or we don't move on to the next thing, right? Clarissa said, I guess I'll have to go find my book. Like my immediate response is like, well, where did you leave it? Where could it be next? When did you last see it? You know, I mean, so if you just stick with what's your plan for that? And wait, 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 wait. In this way, we begin to have kids figure things out themselves. Now, yesterday, the question came from a parent who was saying, yeah, but what if they never do that? What if they never figure things out for themselves? Can I give them a suggestion? And I asked the parent to first ask, what's your plan for that? Then prompt again, well, if you did know what the plan was, what would it be? And I'm not sure why that question works, but it works. If you did know, what would the plan be? And then finally, you can ask, would you be open to a suggestion of what you might do? And when you make the suggestion, you want it to have a lot of conditional language because you want to put as much space between your ownership of the idea and the idea itself, because you want to give them space to either take it on as their own idea or to reject the idea on its merits, not just because it's your idea. So I wonder if maybe one approach might be to da 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 da. And when I preface my idea with, I wonder if maybe it might be, I give the child a lot of space to say like, no, that won't work, or no, I don't like that idea, or well, maybe it could. And then I can go again. I say, well, if it could work, how might that work? And again, I'm not telling you what to do, kiddo. I'm not telling you exactly how it has to go and how it has to be. I'm just asking if maybe that might be a way to do it. So this keeps us in flow with each other because I'm not coming down as the heavy who's telling you to get into action and to get it done. I'm not telling you I know better than you do how to do your work, even if I really do know, right? I'm resisting that. I'm trusting that you can figure it out yourself. Okay, now next slide. Okay, if we are going to give our children the space and the freedom and the room to try things out themselves, then when it fails colossally, as it may well do, we need to celebrate their mistakes. And we need to say, I am so proud of you for trying it out that way. But Mom, it didn't work, and I got a bad grade. Well, yes, you did this time. So what would you do next time? And maybe before that, you might even ask, what did go well about the way you did it? What did you like about this project? Where did it work? And then you can say, what would you do next time? What would you change? What's the missing piece? But don't ask all those questions at once, like I just did. Ask one question and wait, and wait, and wait. And when you first start giving the kids space to do this, and you ask them, what was the thing that went wrong? Or what would you do next time? Very often, again, they retreat to that safe space of, I don't know. So you go back to, if you did know, what would be the thing you would most want to change next time? There's something about putting my head down when I'm waiting for a kid that helps me wait. I don't know why, but it puts me in this kind of like, I'm just sitting here hanging out mode, as opposed to this energy of like, just give me an answer because I want you to have an answer mode. because as my mother points out, Mom, you can be really intense. So when I physically put myself back into wait mode, it helps me give kids the space to just be in whatever situation they're in. Like I'm there, I'm next to them, I'm ready to help them, but I'm not taking over for them. And I want you to consider when you've had a really rotten day or something is really bugging you and you come to complain to your spouse about that rotten day or this thing which you haven't figured out, which is bugging for you. Do you want them to jump in with, Deborah, you know what you should do?
Tell me, what should I do?
Is that what you want your spouse to do? Do you want your spouse to jump right in and tell you what to do?
No, because it makes me feel like they don't understand the emotions that are going on.
Yeah. So what do you want your
alienated from them?
What do you want your spouse to do?
Shut up and listen.
Or to say, how do you feel about that? Or what was that like? To explore a little bit.
Yeah, right? Just be present. Be open to hearing more. What was frustrating? And you know, when a kid comes home with a bad grade, they probably don't want to shift right away to what to do next time. And so taking the time to acknowledge the disappointment. Deborah, Clarissa, and I were all entrepreneurs. And being an entrepreneur is to be eternally disappointed, right? You hoped for this, you got this. And before you can get that hope back again to go out there and do your next entrepreneurial act, you kind of have to have a moment of like, oh, that was less than I'd hoped for, right? I mean, nobody else is giving us a grade, but our grades come in different forms. And we got like our numbers aren't what we hoped for. But that's okay, because what I'm gonna do next time, right? And then when we've had that moment, we can begin to do it. But if
it's a great thing to model with our kids.
Yeah. And if that space in between, somebody comes in and they're right into solution mode. Oh, well, you know what you should do? You know what you should have done? It just feels awful.
Can I add a thought, Elisabeth?
Yeah.
What just struck me, and this is actually something going back that I acknowledge that frustrated me with my mom, was like, I acknowledge that I'm a reasonably like smart individual. I can figure a lot of things out. And I see it with my mom. I see it with my husband, that like, as soon as they jump into fix it mode, there's a part of me that bristles that like, what, you think I'm too stupid to figure this out on my own?
Yeah.
And I can remember feeling that as a teenager as well. You know, how many times did we see teens responding to their parents? I know, Mom, I know. And it's like, well, of course, as the adults were like, and I hear my mom in my head, well, you know, but you don't do. Right? My father is laughing because he can hear my mother saying that to me. Right? But it strikes me now looking at it going, if we're constantly providing that, number one, we're taking the opportunity away for them to figure it out, but we're also telling them that we don't think they can.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That's an excellent point. And I think that one of the greatest absolute gifts that we can give to our children is our faith in them. Our faith that they will figure it out. So, you know, when you go through these cycles and they seem stuck, sometimes we want to jump in. If we can give them a few more days of thinking, like, well, I'm sure you're going to figure this out. And if you want to talk about it more, I'm here. Wait, right? Again, the wait, the silence allows them to come forward.
May I just piggyback on that for a second?
Yeah.
when I was a young teacher and they first started to formally teach us about wait time in the classroom, I started doing that. And when I would ask a question and then I would just wait, the kids would start looking around behind them to see who it was I was staring at angrily, because I had the eyebrow going with my students when they didn't behave. So I had to stop and explain to them that I'm not giving you enough time to respond. So I'm going to take a little bit of time to let you guys formulate an idea or an answer. So I learned from there that if you're going to change any kind of policy, whether it's in your classroom or in your house, giving people a heads up before you implement it is always a good idea.
Right. And actually, it's part of the metacognition, right? It's part of articulating out loud what is our strategy. So we can go to our kids and say, John, my goal for you is to become more independent in doing your own work. And my strategy for doing that is going to be two things. For one, I'm going to ask you what your plan is. And for two, I'm going to wait and give you the space to come up with your own plan.
Sounds like a plan.
Sounds like a plan. All right. My freebie for today is my Are You Raising an Adult checklist. And this is a list of 8 categories or areas that I see as being more on the parents than on the school system. These are sort of the life skills. And we need to have a strategy for making sure that the learning isn't nothing, 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 nothing. Oh my God, you're about to go away to college. I'm going to try to cram in all that learning. Ideally, learning those life skills is sort of a 6th through 12th grade progression of gaining them. So one way to use the checklist would be to grade yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. Where is your child with each of these things? What grade are they in? And kind of think, okay, what could I do to help develop skills for them by the time they're in 12th grade? And that is me for today.
Awesome. And I saw, like, Anna, I saw you scribbling to write that down. I'll be sending out a follow-up email in the next couple of days, and we'll make sure that the links and the websites and the Facebook groups and everything that we all have available for you are in the email. So if you don't get it down or you're afraid of like getting it down wrong, don't worry. I'll send you the links in the next couple of days.
Yeah, I can put it in the chat.
Awesome. All right. So we're going to take just a quick, actually, first of all, Q&A. Any questions for Elisabeth? We didn't have any get chatted in, but any thoughts, any curiosities? Lynn, by the way, glad to have you. I know you're hanging out listening, or I'm hoping you're hanging out listening. So if you have any questions, definitely chat them.
I would like to piggyback on something that Elisabeth said earlier regarding allowing the kids to make mistakes. One of the reasons why parents don't want to let the kids make mistakes is because the parents are afraid that the kids are going to fail. But if you allow them to fail, then they'll understand that they can pick themselves back up and dust themselves off and keep going. When I used to coach basketball, because some of the kids would be so anxious about missing shots, we made it a goal that they should get out there and try to take 4 shots. That was their goal. We didn't count if they made it or not. We were just counting whether or not they took the shots. So it became a standard that your job was to try, and you were successful if you managed to get 4 shots in. So that way they understood that failure is the way you form your frame of references for it. And also, it's not a big deal if you do miss or you don't succeed with what you wanted to do.
What a great structure.
And that'll play into my chat about mindset as well. The other thing to keep in mind as we go through all of this, obviously we've all had a lot of experience working with kids. From a biological perspective, keep in mind that the brain actually forms from the back forward. So, you know, it goes from the brain, you know, the spinal column into the brain stem, and what they call the lizard brain, or the, like, your fight or flight, emergency, oh crap, what do I do? Emotional response brain is at the back of the brain. And the frontal cortex, which is right behind the forehead, that's where rational thought happens. And of course, that is the last thing to develop. So a lot of what Elisabeth is talking about here, those are skills that, or those are thoughts and processes that actually take place in the frontal lobe. And so it's just like, you know, you wouldn't get mad at a kid who couldn't run a marathon at 3 because physiologically they're not built to do that yet. But when we get into these preteen and teenage years, like their brains are coming a long way. They've come a long way since they were born. And we expect them to process oftentimes the same way that we do. And so to Elisabeth's point about like, you know, when they say they don't want to go over to the store or the other side of the store by themselves, we look at it and we're like, seriously, it's the other side of the grocery store. Like, what's wrong with you? Like, this is the thought process often in our heads, when in fact, if they haven't laid down that pathway and had the experience or had that learning process, they don't have the skills to do it yet because their brains aren't fully formed. And by the way, they won't be until their mid-20s. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news. But know that that's a perfectly reasonable when they're like, I don't know how to do a push-up. My muscles aren't strong enough to do it. It's the same kind of thing, that their brain isn't quite there yet. And they really do need those things. So just a little point from a biology perspective. Okay. So
I'm gonna say, take a break.
Yep. 5 minutes. And we'll be back at about oh, I'm sorry. Are you saying for us, Elisabeth, or for kids?
No. I'm saying we have to give our people their bio break because we said we would give it to them. And Absolutely. We want to make sure Deborah can start.
You got it. So we'll be back in about 5 minutes with Deborah.
Okay, sounds good. And I'm actually going to run myself. I said I wouldn't need to, but I'm going to.
Beth, you're humming.
I'm humming. It's me. Sorry. See?
This actually goes straight into what Deborah's going to be talking about in just a couple of minutes. Hey, Denise, welcome to have you. Welcome to have you. Welcome. We're glad to have you. Wow. Can you tell I haven't been to the gym today yet?
Hi, everybody.
Where are you, Denise?
You have to unmute yourself, Denise.
Or write it in the chat, one or the other.
San Diego. How about you, Lynn? Where are you from?
San Diego. Yay! West Coast rules.
Eunice and I actually used to work together when I lived in San Diego.
Really nice.
Yep.
Fun, fun, fun.
And we have kept in touch since I moved away.
Yeah, so yesterday we were talking about, we were talking about learning styles and hacking, and that's always like when you get the question of you know, like when you're doing icebreakers and things, what's something people don't know about you? For me, it's always like, if I'm not singing out loud, I'm singing in my head. So it is, Zoom is dangerous because then I don't always have the like, oh, you're not supposed to be singing out loud right now filter on. Oh.
All right, well, shall we rock and roll? And hey, Lynn, if you're hearing this, if you are inclined, go ahead and type to us, tell us a little bit about like where you live or how you have teenagers in your world. And same thing for you, Denise, about how you have, I mean, I know, because I know you, but
for the rest of us.
Like, so, all right, shall we?
We shall. And it's my great pleasure and delight to introduce our next speaker, Deborah Davis. She is an award-winning author, speaker, and coach with over 3 decades of experience in middle school and high school education. As a teacher, Deborah helped countless families replace the pain typical of tween and teen years with fostering positive and healthy relationships despite all the adolescent angst. She's the founder of the Awesome Mom Tribe, and she's a pretty awesome mom herself. And she now applies all the experience in education to coaching parenting skills. Armed with a great sense of humor, a BS in education from the University of Massachusetts, and a master's in education in supervision from Emory University, she provides guidance and encouragement to moms to help them foster positive and healthy relationships with their families. Deborah's latest book is How to Keep Your Daughter from Slamming the Door. I'd like to add my own personal testimony. This is a really spot on, concrete book. She gets this relationship 100%, and she really walks parents through concrete ways to approach issues and to transform their relationship with their kids. I loved looking at this book. Deborah's previous titles include How to Get Your Happy On and The Love of Fairs series. Learn more about Deborah at www.deborahanndavis.com. That's Deborah with an H and Ann with no E. DeborahAnnDavis.com. Take it away.
Thank you. Well, I'm really glad everybody is here, and I'm so happy to be able to do this. And I just want to say that with the title of my book, How to Keep Your Daughter from Slamming the Door, my daughter said to me, Mom, you can't write that book. I never slammed the door. I said to her, well, why do you think that was? All right, I'm going to share my screen here.
My mom certainly could have used that book a few years ago.
Like 2 or 3 years ago, Clarissa.
Okay, I think that we're good. I just need someone to tell me that they can see the screen.
We're good.
Okay, good. Alrighty. So I'm talking about learning styles here because some of us are parents at home for the first time with their kids doing distance learning, and some of us are homeschooling, so we're all set with that. And some of us are thinking, well, I never signed up for this, what's going on? And this talk is to talk to you about learning styles and how you can maximize them during the quarantine. So, oops, hang on. I have to click. All right, there we go. So first of all, we got to discuss why learning styles matter. Basically, if we all had the same learning style, then everything would be great because everybody would teach the same way and everybody would receive information the same way. But the reality is that oh, come on, hang on, there we go. We are all different and we learn differently. And the reason why that matters is because the way we learn is also the way we take in information, and it's the way we process information, and it's the way we do relationships, because the way we deal with the world has to do with how we take the information in from the world. So for our kids, if you have a situation where your child has a dominant learning style that is different from their teacher's learning style, they may not be able to show that they understand the material in a way that the teacher recognizes, or they may not be able to retain the information because it's being presented in a way that doesn't make much sense to them. So since our children are so different, it stands to reason that the parents are all different. If you are now taking care of your kids' education and you've got a different learning style than your child does, then your instincts are going to be that they need to learn in this particular way because that's the way I learned, and so that's the way it works. But in reality, your child may need to go at it in a different direction. And that's what this talk is for you today. Now, there's a lot of different learning styles, but I like to use the learning style inventory from the Georgia State Department of Education, because they only have 3 categories. I mean, I've seen inventories like this that have 18, 21 categories on them, and that's just way too complicated for me. I like to keep it simple. So we're going to talk about auditory learners, and we're going to talk about kinesthetic learners and visual learners. And with the recognizing that there's overlap between all of these. It's not like you are only one and none of the others. We all are combinations of all of them. And when you're trying to figure out which one you are, think in terms of what is your preferred way of receiving information. Now, when I talk about these overlapping areas, obviously they're combinations. So I'm dominantly a visual learner. So when I teach, I do visual things, but I'm also a kinesthetic learner. I like to manipulate and control my environment. So being a science teacher is perfect for me because I get to do all these little visual crazy things on the screen, and then we get to stop and do a science experiment. Now, your go-to learning style depends on what it is you have to do. So say you have to do, say your child has to do a book report. So at that time, they have to go to the part of their being that allows them to get up in front of the class and verbalize. And they have to go to the part of their being that reads the book and understands what the material is. And they have to go to the part of the being that manipulates the book while they're doing that. So your body kicks in for the parts that it needs. Take the process of trying to introduce a small child to books. Their visual side kicks in right away while they're looking at the graphics. And then their auditory side hears you reading the story to them. And then as they get bigger, their kinesthetic side is that part where they want to reach over and start turning the pages themselves. That part when you go from feeding them where they want to hold the spoon themselves, that's a kinesthetic side. So we've all got it. And also all the things that you're doing is all about modeling, just like Elisabeth was talking before, and Clarissa also teaches that what we do, our children will model these behaviors. So as a little aside, I would just like to say that if you've got behaviors going on in your household that you don't want your kids to do, then recognize them and curtail them, because they are going to model their behaviors after your behaviors. Now, when we put a bunch of kids together and say, okay, we're going to now do group projects, everybody feels a bit of tension about that. So my suggestion is, since it's going to happen, is that you learn how to maximize a group project. So basically, if your child understands about learning styles, then your child can talk to the group and say, let's figure out what everybody's learning style is. And I will give you a link to the questionnaire you can fill out to find out what your learning style is. Again, it's from the State of Georgia Department of Education. So your child will now, the group will now identify who's kinesthetic, who's auditory, and who's visual. And then they can assign jobs based on their strengths. For example, The visual learners will be the people who go out and do the research because they're fine with going and reading and finding the information. The auditory learners will be the people who will develop the verbal presentation that you're going to do for the class. And then the kinesthetic people will be the ones who will make the poster or make the trifold board or whatever it is that you're going to have in your presentation. When you create a group where everybody's working towards their strengths, it's a much more positive situation and people are more likely to take care of their duties. This is the link, and like Clarissa said, that we're going to have those sent out to you later, but it's deborahanndavis.com/learning styles inventory. You'll find this form there and you just download it and use it. And I'll go over this a little bit later. But once you figure out what your learning style is, then you can figure out, and what your child's learning style is, then you can figure out how to better interact with them and how to serve them better in their strengths. Now, this is not an excuse to say, well, I'm a visual learner, I don't need to know how to manipulate things. This is just a statement that this is where your strengths are. And the other things need to be shored up. You need to be brought along. You need to be encouraged in the manner that suits your learning style. So let's talk about visual learners first. Visual learners, I know this from personal experience, we learn by seeing. I need to sit in the front of the classroom so I can see the teacher. I can't explain to you why that matters to me, but I need to see the teacher's face and what they're doing. And that helps me understand the content of the material better. And if you've got a classroom where the teacher has you seated by alphabetical order, you're a visual learner whose name begins with Z, then you're in the back of the room and it automatically puts you at a disadvantage and in a less comfortable position for learning. And visual learners take a lot of notes. That's the way we absorb the material. And we love anything that you look at. We like diagrams and graphs and charts. We like transparencies and workbooks and flip charts and flip books and handouts. All those things are great for visual learners. They help us process the information. Auditory learners, obviously, are people who process information best by listening. And they like verbal lectures. Like when I was in college, I'd be in this big auditorium and the teacher would be down in the front looking like an ant. And I had a hard time focusing on what was going on because it was all auditory for me. But auditory learners thrive in that kind of a situation. They love discussions. They like talking things through and listening to what others have to say. And of course, auditory learners are good listeners. But unlike a visual person who in the conversation is paying attention to your gestures and your facial expressions and the way you're holding your body, auditory learners are tuned into the sound of your talk, your pitch, your intensity. They hear the emotion by your speed and the tone of your voice. That's what they focus on. And they find that as opposed to reading written words, audiobooks are stronger for auditory learners. Audiobooks means that, not that you say, well, you don't have to learn how to read. It means that you read along with the book. And if you're trying to encourage somebody to do that, then what you could say is, especially a young person, I'd like you to read along with the person in a penguin voice, or I'd like you to read along with the person like you are a grandpa. And then that way they will be still saying the words, but playing a game with it. And they'll be hearing it, so they'll be processing the information. One of the great tools that you have is something that will record the kids, because if they can read a text out loud and tape it, then they will go back and listen to that later. And that's the way they'll study. Visual learners will go back and reread their notes, but auditory learners are better off listening to what they taped for themselves. Kinesthetic learners is my third group, and they are the smallest percentage of our population. And they like to learn by moving and touching and engaging their body in the learning part. And many kinesthetic learners find it hard to sit for long periods of time, which is, you can train them to sit there, but they will tune out. And I know this from me, my kinesthetic side is that I listen and listen and I focus and I'm doing really good. And then I start to get antsy, but I'm an adult and I can sit still pretty much for a long periods of time. But in my mind, I'm thinking, how long do I have to do this? And how much more time has gone by? And how much more time do I have to wait? And I'm not listening to what is being presented anymore. I'm all in my head about the waiting till I can move again. If you can find classes for your kids that are hands-on, then this is great. Like this is a cooking class, and science classes are great because we do experiments. They get to manipulate things. And kinesthetic learners love projects. Anything they can build or create or design is wonderful for your kinesthetic learners. And your visual learners and auditory learners may be more hesitant along those lines, but it's really good for them to do this kind of stuff. And I forgot to mention this earlier when I was talking about the groups, but if you've got a kinesthetic learner and a visual learner and an auditory learner in the same group, yeah, you can divide it up and make their own jobs that teach to their strength, but they will also see what the other kids are doing. So for a visual learner, that will be like them seeing demonstrations of other ways they can do things. So it's always good. So if you would kindly take a moment and in the chat, write down what kind of learner you think you are. Auditory, kinesthetic, visual, or a mixture. I'll give you a minute to do that. Well, less than a minute. And then, do your children learn the same way that you do? So if all the kids in your house learn the same way you do, put a yes. If all the kids in your house learn the same way, do not learn the same way you do, put a no. And if the kids, some of the kids learn the way you do and some of them don't, write both. If you have different learning styles than your kids, that might be a source of conflict that you can easily erase. For example, if you have an auditory child, if you have a visual child and you're an auditory parent, and you say to them, when you're done with that show, take out the garbage, and they'll go, oh, okay, sure. Then when the show's over, they forget and they go off and do something else. And then everybody gets upset because the chore's not done again, right? But if you take a sticky note, put it on the table in front of your visual learner, and it says garbage, and say, when you're done with the show, take the garbage out. When the show's over, they'll see the note and they'll say, oh, garbage, and they'll go take it out. So things like that will help you bridge the gap between you and your kids. Now, if you've got visual learners, this is what you can do to help them learn. This is how you can help them maximize what they're good at. Visual learners like to have new tasks demonstrated. When we went through inquiry-based science, where you put a bunch of stuff out there and you say to the kids, go ahead and try it, I found that very distressing. I like to see somebody demonstrate it, and then I'll go try it myself, and then I'll do variations on it. But that's just the way it is for me because I'm a visual learner. Take advantage of educational TV shows and videos. Whatever subject your child is learning in school right now, I guarantee you can find something online that will cover that same topic, and you can use that to enhance their learning. Picture books with graphics, we all know that from our toddlers, but it turns out that for high school kids and even college kids, having illustrations in a textbook makes it much easier for visual learners to process the information. Now, flowcharts and collages. What I do when I'm writing a book is I take a whole bunch of sticky notes and I lay them out on the floor, and then I rearrange them according to what makes sense to me. And then I stick them all on notebook paper so it maintains the order that they were in. And that's how I organize. That's how I do outlines. I cannot do a written outline. I've never been able to complete one. But that process I just described using flow charts or this type of collage is the way I can organize my thoughts when I'm doing a big project. Visual to-do list where you put a picture in there instead of a checklist is also great for visual learners. And even though this picture, looks like it's for youngsters, it's still a good idea for your older kids because they don't have to go over and read it. They could just see at a glance by the picture of what they got to take care of. And making lists of school tasks, like checklists, especially if they have something due this today and they've got something due this week and they've got something due next month, then you put this all on one list and they check them off so they still know what else they've got to do that's still hanging over them. And then my favorite is color coding everything. With my lesson plan book, I used to make a different color for each one of my classes so that when I wanted to flip pages, I could see exactly who I was referring to when I was looking at my lesson plans. So visual learners are big on color coding. For auditory learners, if you've got auditory learners, this is what you could do to help them. But first, I want to have this little conversation with you. So I'm going to stand on my soapbox. Auditory learners listen. They're in the other room listening to what's going on with you. So if you're watching the news and you're going, oh, they hear that. If you've got a visual learner and they're peeking around the corner and they see you do like this and you're staring at the screen, they see that. And they're not going to say, Mom, why did you do this? Mom, why did you gasp? They're just going to walk away knowing that something is dangerous and scary and that they don't know if they're safe. They don't know if their parents are safe or if their grandparents are safe because they're kids and they only get snippets. And your older kids are getting snippets from their friends who are getting snippets from the news or whatever they walked in on when they came into the room. So if this is happening, the anxiety in your household is increasing. And the way that you can deal with this is to have a conversation. So you say to them, so what do you know about this topic? For example, like distance learning, that it's about to change. So what do you know about that? What have you heard? What do you understand? How does that make you feel? And then they will talk about their fears and their trepidations, and you'll hear their misunderstandings and you can clear that up. And then what you want to say to them is a message of a reassurance. Don't worry. Even if things change, I've got this. If you're going back to school or if you're coming back home again, we will take care of it. You will be fine. All you have to worry about is being a kid and doing your schoolwork. I got this. And if I don't know how to handle something, I will find someone who does. So you don't have to worry. You're okay and we're okay. Just keep repeating that message to them because that's what they need to hear. Even if you don't believe it, if you're just scared and you're worried, saying it to them will do two things. It'll alleviate their fears and it will do a little psychology change in your own brain just because you're saying the words and the words count. So I'm off my soapbox now and I'm going to go back to my topic. So if you've got an auditory learner, most textbooks have an online version. So if you get some text-to-talk software, you can have your computer read back to them the section that they're supposed to be reading in their book, and that will help them retain the information better. Auditory learners love stories. They like to tell the stories. They like to hear the stories. And if you want to drive a lesson home, then get them a story on that particular lesson. It's great for history. It's great for biographies. And for if you want to get something in there, like you're trying to teach them a lesson, like a moral lesson, go get them a story to listen to about it. When my daughter was kindergarten, her school decided that they should learn Japanese. So they were learning the days of the month and the days of the week and the numbers, but it was all through songs. And they learned these things. Like I remember us being in the living room and singing head, shoulders, knees, and toes in Japanese. And she knew where all the parts of the body were because of the songs. Out there are tons of resources. radio programs, videos, TED Talks, anything. You just put in the subject that your child is learning, and then put in something about it being verbal or audible, and see what you get, because there'll be tons of stuff out there. When your child is doing something, another way to help them retain the information is to have them share it with you afterwards. So if they did a report at school, then have them teach it to you. If they did a worksheet, then have them explain some of the answers on the worksheet to you. Them hearing their own voice helps them with retention. When they have a project or a worksheet and their instructions are on it, then either you read the instruction out loud and then the two of you discuss them, or they read the instructions out loud and then the two of you discuss them. And then that way they will retain what they're supposed to do. And one final thing here is that auditory learners love group discussions. They love the conversation and listening to ideas and then having a chance to contribute to that. They process that very, very well. So your auditory learners love sitting around the kitchen table with the family discussing how your day went. Now for kinesthetic learners, any kind of puzzle or game or thing where they have to put their hands on it and move it here or sort it out is wonderful for them. And if you have any kind of way for them to act out something, whether they do a little play for it, or they do a puppet show for it, or use their favorite dolls to talk about something, that will help them retain the information and understand the information. So any kind of role playing that they can do will also bring it home. For example, as a science teacher, we did the science safety rules in the beginning of each year, and they had to learn them. So for a kinesthetic learner, we had songs on the computer. I'm talking high school kids here, so don't ever think that this stuff is too young for them. We'd have songs that I'd find on the computer, and we'd play the songs and they'd be acting them out and pretending to do it. And those kinds of things help them remember the rules, because I'm going to quiz them on it. So they need to know how to be safe in my lab. And then you can create all kinds of games for teaching information. Like you've got some dice, you could throw the dice and they have to add them up and then jump on the number in the hopscotch thing. Or one of my favorites is you set up A, B, C, D, and then you do multiple choice questions with them. So when they pick an A, they got to jump on the A. If they pick a B, they jump on the B. And of course, science experiments rock, and any other kind of hands-on activity are wonderful. And then the last one on this I'm going to say is that we are notorious for not exploring our own backyards. And there are so many things that have something to do with what your kids are learning that you can just go out there and go to places and visit museums and visit landmarks and see things that will reinforce what's being learned in school, but for kinesthetic learner will be much more impactful if they surround themselves with it. Now, this is the final segment of my talk, the how you work with a distant learner section. So I'm going to do the visual and the auditory and the kinesthetic learners separately. And then we're going to talk about a unique way to use the inventory, the learning styles inventory, to interact with your kids. So if you've got visual learners who are working from home, the talking head will be fine for them if they are close enough to the screen. But if the person is really far back, then that really is like an auditory thing for the kids. But once the teacher switches over to maps and diagrams and charts and things like that, your visual learner will be doing just fine. Visual learners take notes. So once they take the notes, make sure they reread the notes, and that will cement the information. Again, they like handouts and worksheets, and they love anything that is diagramming. So many visual learners will diagram things, the notes, in their notes, so that they will be able to understand it better. And visual learners love doing workbooks because it helps organize their thinking into things, little increments that they can see. For auditory learners, the computer business is great because they are happy to just sit there with a talking head and listen and learn that way. And if you can get them, if you can get permission to record the classes, then they can listen to them again later, which is the way they will go back and study. And also I recommend books on tape, you know, audiobooks, for them to do their research for reports and projects. And don't forget that there's tons of auditory resources out there for the visually impaired. So if you can tap into their libraries, then you'll have tons of things you can use for your auditory learners. And then if you've got worksheets, which are not their favorites, have them read the worksheet aloud and have them read their answers aloud. And all that stuff will help them retain it instead of them trying to blow through it and just get anything written down. If you've got distance learning going on in your home with your kinesthetic learners, you might be finding it a little difficult because they don't like to sit in front of the computer for long periods of time. So again, get permission to record the lesson. If you can record the lesson, then you can put breaks in there. Now, the length of the break will depend on the age of your kid and who your kid is. You know your child. The smaller children will need to take a break like every 15 or 20 minutes, and the older kids will need a break between 30 and 45 minutes. But if you take a break, you let them work, and then they take a break and have them do push-ups and come back and work for another 15, 20 minutes, and then take a break and run up and down the stairs and work again, and then have them run around the house. So this thing will help them with the retention because they will come back recharged and ready to learn again. If you have a high enough counter and a laptop, have your kids take notes standing up. Then the top part of their body will be working on the lesson, and the bottom part of the body can be tap dancing or whatever it is they need to do to keep themselves active. If you have kids who doodle in the margins, do not mistake that for not paying attention. Doodling is another way for them to get their energy out so that they can focus on what's going on. And then active snacking is another one. If you can give them a snack where they have to do something with it, like breaking open a peanut or pistachio, they will retain information better while they are listening and breaking open the snack. I would like to encourage you to not reinvent the wheel because let's face it, you're parents and you've got a lot on your plate and this is all exhausting. So if you're going to try to find all these creative things to keep your kids engaged, you're going to wipe yourself out. So don't reinvent the wheel. Go find stuff online. I looked up activities for kinesthetic learners, and this was the first website I pulled up. And this is a document that they included with it, all about Learning Press. They have tons of stuff for all different kinds of learners. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You just need to go out there and use the stuff that's already proven to work for other people. And I also want to point out that all this stuff is about not just the kids, but it's about the adults. If you have a job that you love, most likely you are in a job that suits your strong learning style. If you are in a job that you're good at, but you really don't want to be there, it's just you're able to compensate, but you're not doing something that is geared towards what works for you. So for me, I use the example that I hate cooking. So I'm an accomplished person, but when you put me in the kitchen, I can cook, but I hate it. I hate the planning of the meals and the organizing the food and the cooking and the cleanup afterwards. I like the eating, but I just don't like the rest of it. That's not what I do for my learning style. So it doesn't suit me. So if you are a parent who's been in a job at work and now you are home and you are doing distance learning with your student, with your child, this may not be something that is in your wheelhouse, but you can still be good at it. So again, don't lock yourself into trying to get there and get all the information and make it all up yourself. Go find stuff, do little bits at a time, take baby steps, and you will be able to handle this just fine. Okay, so this is the learning style inventory, and I learned for this presentation on a program called Doodly that it's a free program. I'm really big on getting free things. I learned how to make this video and it debuted yesterday and I'm going to show it to you. Anybody can do this. And this is a great thing for you to use for your kids. Oh, let's see here. All right, so this topic is about how to use the learning style inventory to bridge the gap between you and your daughter. You go to my website and you open up the document, make a copy for you and make a copy for your daughter, and you both take the learning style inventory, but don't share your information. You take it a second time and pretend you're your daughter, and your daughter takes it a second time and pretends that she's you. And once you've done that, then you can go ahead and share your information. Isn't this a cool program? So when you share your information, first tell her what your learning style is, and then she'll tell you what her learning style is, and then you can see whether or not you got them right. I did a retreat for moms and teenage daughters a couple of years ago, and I did a type of quiz with them like this, and all the mothers got their kids' learning style correct. All the children gave the mothers the same learning style that the children have, because the children see everything through their own lens. So what happens is when the child says something to the mother like, I'm going over to my friend's house, and the mother says, what are you, crazy? There's a pandemic. Blah, 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 blah. And the child goes, well, I didn't think mom was going to react that way. That's not the way I would be reacting. What's going on? Why doesn't she understand me? Why can't we communicate? And the child starts to feel kind of alienated and doesn't trust you to have her back because you don't get her. One of the ways you can bridge that gap is by having this conversation about having different learning styles and going through this process, because when you do that, they will understand that there is differences. If you go to my website, the directions for what I just said will be there. This is them. And then, so you don't have to remember everything that I just went over. Okay. And I'd like to say that there is a chapter in How to Keep Your Daughter from Slamming the Door that covers everything that I did right here. And you can get this book pretty much everywhere. And lastly, I would like to invite you to sign up for my newsletter. It's called Mary Meddling, and it comes out every month. And here's some samples of topics that I write about. And for my freebie for saying thank you for being here, if you go to my website, deborahanndavis.com, down in the middle on the homepage, there is a place where you can get a free copy of my book, How to Get Your Happy On. And please, please pick it up. It's a wonderful tool for, especially now where everybody's having so much tension in their homes. And you can use this to help bridge the gap with your kids and help them feel better about what's going on in their lives. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Oh, wait, one last thing. You can email me at deborahanndavis.com, info@deborahanndavis.com, and I will be happy to answer any questions and help you with anything you want to do in terms of your relationship with your kids. So now I'm going to stop sharing my screen. There we go. So does anybody have any questions?
I was just going to ask, I know Elisabeth had some good commentary in there to your point about not thinking that anything is too childish for our teenagers. She was talking about how she, for chemistry class, they learned elements by dressing up as the different elements and going to an element party. I
used to do the parts of the body with Simon Says, where I would do, clavicle and the names of the bones and the names of the muscles. And then I would, this is your clavicle, right? I'd go, Simon Says, touch your clavicle. And I'd do like this. And I'd mess them all up. And those little high schoolers were so competitive.
No, that was really fabulous, Deborah. So good to be reminded of all those different ways of thinking and approaching things.
And to know that you don't have to make it up yourself. All those resources are out there. So basically you pick the way you want things to go, and then you go look up stuff that supports it and you bring it back to your house.
Exactly.
Thank you. I used to use the visual auditory kinesthetic with the students I was tutoring for SAT and ACT. And I developed my own questionnaire And I took the questionnaire myself first, and percentage-wise, I was 40% visual, 40% kinesthetic, and only 20% auditory.
That's pretty much what I am.
Yeah, I used to joke, my wife complains I don't listen to her. Well, duh.
Yeah, so I married a man who is all kinesthetic and he's verbal and he wants to talk and talk and talk and talk. And when we first got married, we got together during the summer. I was on vacation. Then when school started, I was like, okay, I don't want to talk in the morning. I just want to get ready. So he'd follow me around like a puppy, talking. And I didn't want to hurt his feelings. So I finally worked up the courage to say, you know, I really can't handle talking in the morning. He goes, oh, that's fine. Anytime you don't want to talk in the morning, just tell me. So the next morning he comes in and he starts talking. And I said, I really don't want to talk in the morning. He goes, okay, well, that's fine. I mean, the reason why you don't want to talk is, and he started blah, 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 blah. I was like, I'm not even gonna bother anymore. Yep. And I cannot do numbers in the air at all. I can't do phone numbers, addresses, none of that in the air. Write it down, I'm good. And my sister, who is a special ed teacher, told me once that she thought that maybe I had ADHD because I always had to write things down. But now I know it's because I'm a visual learner.
Well, and yesterday, one of the attendees that we had, she's a friend of mine and she's a phenomenal artist. And one of her takeaways was, she's like, I never took notes in school. She said, like, with your workshop, she said, I understand why I struggled so mightily in school. She's like, I'm an artist. I always thought I was a visual learner. Mm-hmm. And I said, no, I said, that's how you put your message out in the world. But the way that you take it in is physically, because you're the one actually doing the drawing. And she was like, she said, I never took notes. I drew everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For me, when my daughter was coming up, I'm a visual learner. I'm take notes and do this and do that. Right. So I was always trying to get her to do that. And that wasn't the way that she learned, because she is a kinesthetic person. She is a person who doodles in the corners. And so instinctively I understood, because I'd been around so many kids, you know, thousands of kids over the years. I understood to give her that space, but I didn't understand about not being scared for her if she wasn't doing it the way I understood. I just was really determined that I was going to be there in case she failed, like speaking to what Elisabeth was saying. But I had enough experience with the classroom to know that my kids didn't fail. My kids learned the information. However it was that they were going to do it, they all learned it. And when I gave her that freedom, so did she. But I was scared the whole time for her. So if I knew then what I know now.
Right.
We do what we do.
And that's something else I learned too with my students was a kinesthetic student is not going to sit in front of at a desk. A lot of times they study best, they learn best when they're just stretched out on their bed. And I said, what? That doesn't make sense, but it works for them.
Yeah.
A lot of times the auditory person has to have music going in the background. That drives me crazy.
I totally forgot to say that. Exactly. And for me, I need the music at my breaks. I really need the music in my breaks. I need to have it rev me up so I can move around a little bit, but I cannot have the music on it when I'm trying to do something, unless it's classical and it doesn't have any words to it. But I can't listen to it because I will listen to it. I am the kind of person where I notice the music that's in the elevator. I listen to music, so I can't have it on around me because I focus on it. And I have never in my entire life fallen asleep in front of the TV. I'm too stimulated by it.
My favorite way to fall asleep.
Oh, that's my husband. My husband, I said, would you want to watch such and such tonight? He's like, oh, sure, I can fall asleep in front of anything.
Yep, exactly. Exactly. Okay. Let's take a little break, whether that's just to move our bodies or.
Yes, everybody get up and move around. Everybody get up and move around.
But we need to keep moving along so we can keep time. So I'm going to say 3 minutes. Is that okay, ladies?
Yes.
All right. 3 minutes and we'll be back, and Deborah will introduce Clarissa. If I had music, if I knew how to play music through Zoom, I would play it and we could all do some dancing. But I don't know how. But I can hum.
Elisabeth, you're muted.
You want me to unmute?
Oh, I thought you were talking.
No, I was singing.
Oh. Clarissa, you ready?
I'm ready if y'all are ready.
I am.
Yep.
So it is my extreme pleasure to introduce Clarissa Constantine. She is an only child who had a tough relationship with her mom. During college at the University of Hartford, which happens to be in my backyard, basically, she began what would turn into a decades-long career as a test prep coach. She's helped thousands of kids around the world navigate the college and grad school admissions processes. Along the way, she's joked that she sometimes finds herself playing the role of therapist more than tutor, helping the kids manage the stresses of life. But no matter how many young adults she helped, she longs for a closer relationship with her mom. Unfortunately, that didn't come to pass before her mom passed in November of 2019. She's driven to help other families avoid the heartache, the lost years, and the regret that she, and most likely her mom too, experienced. In addition to test prep coaching and dreaming of the ways to help parent and tween connect, and the ways for her program, Parent Tween Connection, will help families. She's also a certified life coach who helps teens learn concepts like goal setting, self-compassion and self-esteem, mindfulness, and growth mindsets. So without further ado, Clarissa, take it away.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So if you do have questions or thoughts along the way, please do go ahead and chat them to me. I do have the chat window open. I am definitely an auditory and kinesthetic person. So if you can tell, I'm standing because I don't sit very well. I am definitely one of those who was always at the back of the classroom because my last name started with S. My maiden name started with S. And I was always also the tallest kid. So I was always in the back. So thankfully that worked well because I could stand up and not block anybody. So anyway, so my first question for you, the term mindset has kind of become like a buzzword lately. And I'm curious what you think of when you hear the term mindset? What does it mean to you? Either type or pop on microphone, that's fine. Elisabeth, attitude. Yeah, I can agree with that. I think I see Anna typing. Not sure. Your focus, absolutely. And there's many different ways we can go with that, right? So here is how dictionary.com actually defines it. If I can find my forward button that is hidden by my people pictures. Here we go. Yeah, absolutely. Growth or closed, or growth or fixed, right, Denise? So that's part of where we're going. So this is how dictionary.com defines it. It's your attitude, disposition, or mood. It can also be like your inclination and like kind of what your tendencies are. So if you have not heard of Dr. Dweck, Carol Dweck, I do have a picture of it there, but this book is phenomenal. Dr. Dweck is recognized as one of the leaders in the psychology of mindset, psychology of success. And basically, she established this distinction between what we call a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. So as you take a look at this, and I can include this also, this image in the email that we send out and links to this, basically, if you have a fixed mindset, or like you said, Denise, like a closed mindset, you kind of come at the world going, look, what I am is what I am. My intelligence is static. My skills are static. It's kind of like, you know, if you believed, I kind of joke around, like, you know, if God fits into your term and you're like, okay, or into your world, and you have the philosophy that, you know, before you were born, God gave you a cup of intelligence and a half a cup of good looks and a 3/4 of a cup of social skills, then that's where it's at and that's it. And you're just done. And that's how it's going to be. If that's the case, you tend to avoid challenges because you don't ever want to look dumb. You don't ever want to look like you're less than what people think that you are. So taking on something that might be a challenge for you isn't necessarily a guarantee that you're going to be good at it. And this can certainly have some limiting impacts long-term. I was talking with a girlfriend of mine last night who grew up in a home where, you know, straight A's were the norm. They were the expectation. And she's in her mid-40s now looking at launching a business. And she's facing some very real limits in her beliefs about like, but I don't know I can do it. And if I don't know I can do it, I'm not able to take that step forward. So this can absolutely have lifelong impact. When we hit obstacles, we give up easily. We see effort like, well, why bother trying? Because I know I can't do it. So trying isn't going to make it any different. We also tend to be kind of resistant to criticism or feedback or things that can help us grow, because we're like, whatever, why do you just do nothing but criticize me? I can't change it anyway. And probably the piece that impacts our interactions with others the most is the fact that we really are intimidated or threatened or sometimes even resentful of other people's success. Because it's like, well, that's great, they can do it, but I'm just as smart as I am, or I'm just as capable as I am. I'm never going to see that same kind of success. A growth mindset, on the other hand, focuses, in the summary that I've kind of come to with it, is that it's more about recognizing the process that we're going through rather than the end goal. We tend to believe that intelligence and innate capacities, abilities, natural gifts, if you will, can actually be developed. We tend to embrace challenges if we have more of a growth mindset, because we're like, hey, you know, failure is actually learning. Like, there's no such thing as failing. I learned something in the process. We see effort as a way to actually get better at something or being able to master our skills. We look at feedback from other people as just that, feedback, not criticism, even when it's offered maybe more harshly than is deserved. But we look for opportunities to grow, and we tend to take more ownership and more responsibility in our own growth as a result, because we believe that there's something that we can do about it. So I'm going to propose that everybody here today has at least some part of their belief system that is grounded in the belief that we can change mindset. And that means that we have a growth mentality, because if you weren't here to learn something about how to have a better relationship or interact better with the kids in our lives, why are we here? We'd be like, nope, it's what it is, we're done. So If we can influence our own mindset, then we can also influence the mindsets of the teenagers we interact with, whether it's like our own kiddos, which, by the way, Denise, I can't believe your kid is 13 already. Like, how did that happen? Right. But then, you know, the kids that we tutor, the kids that come into our dojos, the kids that we mentor, right? Or whether they're in our classrooms or not, we can influence them as well. So what we want to think about is the messages that we're sending to them. And at the risk of screwing it up, because I don't want to look like a failure in front of people, I'm actually going to quote a couple of things from Dr. Dweck directly about the messages that we give to our kids or the kids in our world. So I'm curious whether you have either been on the receiving end of this, maybe you've offered feedback like this, or you've heard it. So statements like, wow, you learned that so quickly. You're really smart. Or look at that drawing. He's the next Picasso. He's phenomenal. Or wow, you're brilliant. You got an A without even studying. Anybody hear that along the way? Or said it on us like, no. Well, here's the thing. Those are fantastic things to say to kids, aren't they? Because we're recognizing them for how good they are at whatever they're good at. Here's the catch. If we say, wow, you're so smart, you got that so quickly. Well, what do kids hear? Ooh, I'm smart because I learned that quickly. If I don't learn it quickly, then I'm not smart. Or you're a really good artist. Look at that. You're the next Picasso. Wow. I'm not going to try to draw anything that's a harder drawing to create, because if I don't do it well, then they're not going to think I'm as good of an artist. So here's the challenge. If we focus so much on the end goal and we're not focusing on the process along the way, we're taking these like monstrous jumps to the end, and kids that ends up being like hey, that's a fixed mindset. If I can't produce that result, then I'm not smart, capable, talented, worthy, whatever. So what Dr. Dweck proposes here is that praising the end result and like the intelligence and their innate abilities actually provides more, creates more harm than it does good. And ultimately, at least in our culture, can harm their performance. So what's the proposed alternative? Instead, how many of you have heard the phrase, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey, or it's about the journey, not the destination? This is what we can really do just in terms of our direct interaction with them and the words that come out of our mouths. All right. What do we want to focus on? The more we focus on the process and the effort that they put in, that's what we end up praising. That helps develop the growth mindset. I think it was Elisabeth, you were talking about this earlier, right? Where you were talking about breaking down and going, hey, what are the steps that they're taking? So, you know, Anna, we're both musicians, right? We always got accolades for, wow, you played the Mozart clarinet concerto so beautifully. Did anybody ever praise like what was below the water on the iceberg meme, right? Wow, it sounds like your scales are getting more comfortable. Your fingers are really learning where they're supposed to go. Nobody says that, right? Nobody says, you know, that they're praising the, you know, long tones to get the bow on the string, you know, on every string to sound consistent, or the number of tendus and rond de jambes that dancers do in dance class, right? Nobody ever praises that. So let's look for opportunities to do that. Talk about the process. So things like, wow, I love seeing how much emotion you put into your rehearsals. I can tell how much you love dancing. Or, you know, something actually that my dad used to say is like, I love just listening to you practice because I can tell that you love doing it. Right? It wasn't, I mean, yes, he was like, hey, second movement of Mozart was great at the concert, right? But I remember hearing things like, oh, you know, I love listening to you practice because I know you love it. My husband's a sports performance coach, and he sees this with his athletes all the time, where the parents, who themselves may have been competitive athletes as well when they were younger, they try to slip into coach mode about like, well, why weren't you first? Second place is first loser. We had somebody yesterday saying that their partner was like, you don't win the silver, you lose the gold. Well, that's still all end oriented. If we can come back and be like, wow, you totally hit the gym consistently, and I can see how much more comfortably you're running, or wow, look at the progress that you've made because of the effort that you've put in. If we focus more on the effort and the strategies, the end results will come, but we're not so focused on the end results that we're impacting their ability to make changes along the way. And then, like Elisabeth was talking about earlier, that metacognition is thinking about thinking. It's thinking about the process that goes into whatever your end goal is after a performance, going, hey, what worked well? What do you want to keep? What do you want to let go of and try something different? This is something that I do with my test prep coaching. I work with high school kids for SAT and ACT, but I also work with college age students and adults who are looking to go back to grad school. And every time we do a drill, I always ask them, what worked well in this process? Because you're never going to see this question again. I have to coach them on processes. So like, what worked really well about this process? What do you want to keep? What do you want to change for next time? So focusing more, really emphasizing on the process, what they want to keep, what they want to change to get to the end goal is one of the most important things that we can do. So then Dr. Twett goes into this conversation as well in the section that she talks about parents and teachers and coaches, where we talk about what do we do when kids fail? How do we approach that when they don't achieve the goals that they set out for them to achieve? And she gives an example of a 9-year-old who started gymnastics and goes to her first gymnastics meet and wins nothing, places for nothing, like walks away, not a ribbon, not a medal, nothing. And of course she's dejected. What kid comes back from a competition and doesn't walk away with anything and like, yay, I didn't win anything? None of us does, right? So she proposes a few ways that parents could potentially respond. Well, what do? You tell her, well, I thought you were the best. We all know folks who've said that. We may have even said it, and Anna's all like, I don't know. Why, Anna? What's not so fantastic about that? Oh, you're still muted, Anna. Go ahead and unmute.
Sorry.
There you go.
They don't think that they did anything wrong then. They think, oh, well, then I really should have gotten those awards. My mom said I should have gotten the awards. Why didn't I get the awards? Those other people, those judges, they were wrong. Those other athletes weren't as good as me. And it's a bad progressive mindset.
Absolutely. And that can be the same kind of results that we get. Exactly. It discredits mom as a judge, or potentially discredits the judges, right? But that's the same kind of mindset that we can get if we're like, oh man, you were robbed. How is that, placing personal responsibility on us? It doesn't. And yeah, this whole entitlement thing, that's a whole other conversation, right? So how many times do we actually hear a parent say, well, a parent, coach, mentor, okay, I say parent, but like any of the adults in the village, how often do we hear them be like, well, you didn't win because you didn't deserve it. Ouch, that hurts, right? And maybe we don't want to say it in quite those same terms, but maybe we want to say, well, hey, you're the youngest on the team. Maybe not like chronologically youngest, but you're the newest to the team. You've been doing gymnastics the least length of time. You haven't earned it yet. You haven't mastered your scales enough. You haven't again, processes. What are the pieces that haven't gone into the process enough yet to help you get to that end goal? So when we're looking at supporting them, oh, absolutely, Elisabeth. The other girls, they were more consistent. They showed up to the gym more frequently. They paid attention to their coach more frequently, right? How many times I've heard my husband say with his athletes, and how I've said with my kids, you're just not coachable. You're not willing to talk to let me give you insight on the process that needs to change. So if I could leave you with one tidbit today about what can we do to help foster a more growth-oriented mentality among our younger generation, is help them focus more on that process. And like Elisabeth was saying, give them the opportunity to think. They just don't think as quickly as we do. Our brains are fully developed, theirs are not. Give them that space and really focus on what are the steps that we need to take to get there. Cool beans? Thoughts, questions? I know I end up saying cool beans and coolio. I know when my students start typing that back to me in my classes that I'm like, oh, maybe I need to change up my positivity here. Anna's like, no, I like cool beans. All right, so one other tidbit that I want to throw in here when it comes to growth mindset, it comes partly from personal experience in terms of my own experience with my mom, but also a lot of what I've seen with a lot of my kids, a lot of the athletes that my husband has coached. I know that all of us in mentor, aunt or uncle, teacher, parent, grandparent roles, we want what's best for our kids. The challenge comes in when what we believe is best for our kids isn't necessarily the same as what they believe is the best for them. Now, I am not going to say mom is always right, because I don't think mom is always right. My dad will tell you, I didn't always think mama was right. But there's a couple of things that can come up here when we're really trying to help guide kids in a direction that we feel is positive. Number one is the potential of them receiving the message that our love and our support is conditional. So one of the arenas that I see this come up a lot is when we're teaching morals and values that are often rooted in a religious basis. And when we're like, this is the behavior that I expect, often what is missing is, I will still love you even when, or even if your behavior doesn't match what I'm coaching you on or what I'm teaching you. I also see it a lot in the realm of academics, in families and cultures where school is and good grades are a primary focus. I expect straight A's, but I'm going to love you if you get a B. I'm going to love you if you get a C, and I'm going to help you figure out what to do when you step out of this box. So be aware in the messaging that we're sending to our youth that, like, yes, these are the patterns of behavior that we expect, and I'm still going to love you when you don't fall into that pattern of behavior, because they're going to. They will fall out of that, whether it's they marry somebody of a different faith, or they go down a different academic route than you would like, or they go down a different professional route than you think is appropriate for them. Not having that safety net, or not knowing that their adults in their world are a safety net, even when they step out of that, can absolutely be life-threatening. So take that for what it's worth, and just acknowledge the, bring something in that says, I love you even when. Let's see. Yes. Ooh. For those of you not looking at chat, Elisabeth says, when she asked her 7th graders if their parents loved them when they got poor grades, they said, yeah, but they love us more when they get good grades. That's an example of conditional love. So food for thought. Just, keep in mind, we know that we're well-intentioned, and sometimes those intentions don't necessarily come across as supportively as we might like. I don't know if any of you saw this. Actually, I'm going to pause on this for a second. I have a mantra behind me. So we all know that obesity in this country is a challenge, yes? And you're probably going, Clarissa, what the heck does obesity have to do with mindset? I would argue that for many of us, we've become a country of bubbleheads. We walk around thinking only about this and like what's going on all up in here. And we don't necessarily pay attention. I know, right? We don't necessarily pay attention to how the rest of it impacts this. So when we look at these numbers and we see that 1 in 5 teenagers in this country qualifies as overweight or obese, we immediately think healthcare costs. We think diabetes. We think about some of the psychosocial aspects of things. But here's an interesting statistic. Studies have shown that there's actually an inverse relationship between BMI, which I will argue with a background as a personal trainer, BMI is an imperfect evaluation, but it is an evaluation. There is an inverse relationship between BMI and academic performance. The higher the weight goes, the lower the grades go. And of course, this then becomes a question of, well, what's the chicken or the egg? Well, we definitely have psychological and psychosocial impacts here, which all tie back to mindset, right? Or tie into mindset. If a kid is getting bullied, they're going to have lower self-esteem. They're going to have a lesser likelihood of believing that things will work out okay. And keep in mind, one of the conversations that we had yesterday came up, I mentioned Elisabeth as a mom and a stepmom. She said, when you're dealing in a step family situation, you've got to take the long game. You've got to look at the long-term perspective. Part of the reason that we deal with the suicide rates that we do with our teenagers, you see people going, oh, it's a permanent solution to a temporary problem. The problem isn't just that. It's that our teenagers can't see the long picture. They just physiologically, their brains aren't there yet. They can't see the long term. So when we're looking at brain development and body, we've got brains, bodies, mental perspective. We've got to take a look, obviously, at the psychological side of things. And this is what I have behind me. Exercise is the single most powerful tool you have to optimize brain function. Here's another book for you. I have it there, but it's called Spark by Dr. John Ratey. He is a Harvard psychiatrist. And this entire book is a conglomeration or a compilation of studies about how exercise impacts the brain. Whether we're talking brain development for teenagers, whether we're talking seniors, working to mitigate Alzheimer's, dementia, that kind of thing. And then for everybody in the mid-range, where we're dealing with mental health and or lack of mental health. Exercise is the single most powerful tool that we have to optimize our brain function. Think about the psychological impacts as well, though, right? You have an overweight kid gets in the gym, starts moving, even just walking, starts dropping some weight if it's appropriate for their body, and their confidence starts increasing, or they start doing weightlifting, or like Anna, I'm sure you see this in the dojo, right? With martial arts. You see a kid who's either overweight or even on the other end, the underweight as well. They start gaining this sense of power, which absolutely leads into self-confidence, but it's not just about that. There are actual physiological changes that happen in the brain as a result of movement. So one of the most fascinating studies that he references in here is about a 0-hour PE program that they ran in Naperville, Illinois, wherein they had kids come in and actually do exercise before school started. And then they tracked their progress through a literacy program or literacy assessments that they did throughout the year. And what they found was that the kids who participated in 0-hour PE and worked at 80 to 90% of their theoretical maximum heart rate for as little as 10 to 15 minutes, they saw a 17% increase in their literacy scores, as opposed to less than 11% for the kids who didn't participate. So it was 50% more improvement from 10 to 15 minutes of cardiovascular exercise before they sat down to study. And that was across gender, that was across socioeconomic background, that was across starting scores. So that's pretty compelling. But why? What's actually going on? How many of you have heard the term neurotransmitters? Yeah? Okay. There are all these happy chemicals in our brains. Some of them help lift us up. Some of them help us downregulate. Some of them help us stay fairly middle of the road, right? So when we get into talking about medications, and for the record, I am not saying that medications are bad. I am not a healthcare professional in that variety. I am saying absolutely talk to medical practitioners for support in that arena. What I can tell you though, is that with all of these neurotransmitters in our brains, exercise helps to balance them out. So exercise can absolutely be an effective part of managing mental health. But it's not just balancing the neurotransmitters. Studies have indicated that as exercise increases, so does our brain's production of BDNF, or brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And the more BDNF we have, the faster our brain processes. So what we find is that we learn more quickly and we retain more of what we learn after we exercise. One of the studies that Dr. Rady references was actually a study in Germany back in 2007, where they asked folks to learn some vocabulary words, and then they went and exercised for 15 or 20 minutes and then learned more vocabulary words. And what they found was that people learned vocab words 20% faster after exercise than they did before. So guess what I tell all of my students to do before they come to a tutoring session or a class? You get out there and go for a walk. Now, of course, especially in my LSAT, like my law school bound students, I put the legal term of like, make sure that exercise is appropriate for you. Please consult your medical professional before embarking on an exercise program. But if it is healthy and safe for you, exercise is an immediate, easily accessible tool that we can use to help our kids improve, not just for our kinesthetic learners as well. It's for all of our learners. So Anna, did you recognize a change in that? I see that you made the comment somewhere along the way. You said, oh yeah, you've seen a big difference in your son's grades when he plays basketball, but while he's waiting for the bus. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it absolutely was, you know, the moving around as we wait for the bus. You know, now we're doing, since we're not doing the bus because of COVID, we're in person learning. I'm taking him to school and we don't have that extra time because we have to go wait in that long line. And so, yeah, I've definitely seen a difference in him. And then when a better homework, when they do Taekwondo, if we go straight from school to Taekwondo, then homework is better in the evening when they're more focused on it after doing that.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's the same thing for us. This isn't just about our kids. This is about us, right? That's why when we first started today, when I was tripping over my words for a couple of minutes, I was like, wow, can you tell I haven't been to the gym yet? I totally notice the difference on the days that I get up and I go to the gym versus the days that I don't. And yet the cozy, warm bed is so alluring sometimes.
I have one other thing. We also, the schools in our area, for our Taekwondo, we have a schools program where we go in and do a week of Taekwondo in the schools for every gym class. And we have several schools in one of the school districts that have us come the week before they do their I-STEP tests or their standardized testing, because the principal has noticed that when we come do that week and we work with them on exercise and the 3 types of focuses, their eyes, their bodies, and their brains, they have better test scores that next week.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
Yeah.
That is so fabulous. And I bet discipline issues go way down too.
100%. Well, because kids are getting, I mean, there's also that energy expulsion that, you know, especially us kinesthetic folks, right? We're like fidgeting. If I had $1, I was saying to my dad the other day, I was like, if I had $1 for every time my mother said to me, stop fidgeting, sit still. Oh my God, I'd be a millionaire. I'd be living in Fiji. I'm a kinesthetic learner. I move. It's what I do.
Can I just ask Anna a question? Anna, does your son know that his grades change when he exercises or does basketball in the morning?
I don't know that he does.
That might be a very good thing to point out to him, because then he has a little bit of control over his grades.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, and what I love about exercise, right? Like, I'm really passionate about equity, equal access, providing access to resources, regardless of socioeconomic and gender whatever, right? We can all move. Granted, you know, physical limitations need to be accommodated or need to be adjusted for, but regardless of your socioeconomic background, you can get up and walk. And literally as little as 10 to 15 minutes of exercising, of walking, can have these kinds of impacts. And it's easy. You know, yes, it does mean getting up earlier, Anna, right? You know, but it's like, hey, if this is the single most important thing we can do, or the easiest thing that we can do, can we adjust to fit it in somehow, some way along the way? So you can tell I get nerdy about this. Couple of other things and we'll wrap up. So mindfulness. Mindfulness is also a super big buzzword. And a lot of people think it has to be, you know, sitting there and doing yoga and, you know, meditating or whatever. But the reality is is that mindfulness fundamentally is simply a state of being here now for 30 seconds. And let's be honest, who couldn't benefit from a little bit of this? So looking at a picture that makes you smile, looking at the beach, oh, do I miss the water? We don't have so much water here in Colorado as we did in California. But this is another book that I highly recommend. And full disclosure, I actually haven't even finished reading it yet. I grabbed it from the library. I liked it so much that I bought myself a copy of it off of Amazon, and I haven't finished reading it yet. But it's written by a mom who says right in the beginning, she's like, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a medical practitioner. I am a mom who lived this. And she has excerpts from her son about what his experiences were with debilitating anxiety. I love the fact that she has really easy, actionable strategies that you can incorporate along the way. She talks about some nutrition stuff. She talks about supplements. She talks about mindfulness. She talks about exercise, medications. I mean, the gamut, like she literally went through everything with her son as they navigated this. But one of the things that she says is these are 8 potential outcomes that you can achieve from mindfulness. And I would argue that our kids aren't the only ones who need these. I know I could use a little more of these in my life. So one of my go-to strategies that I recommend to students has to do with balloons. Let me ask you, if I asked you where your lungs were, where would you point? Good. See, Deborah and Elisabeth learned something yesterday. When most students say to me, oh, they're up here. They think about like a big pufferfish breath. But then I say, wait a second, where do you have ribs? Wherever you have ribs, you have lungs, because your ribs protect your lungs. So that also means that they're further down your chest, they're on your sides. And in fact, they're even in your back as well. Like that's why getting stabbed in the back, even metaphorically, hurts so badly. Because if you get physically stabbed in the back, it's gonna puncture a lung, and that's a problem. So I say, hey, practice what I call balloon breathing. I want you right now to take 2 breaths. I want you to imagine that your lungs are like balloons. And as you inhale, they expand in all directions, front to back, side to side, and dropping down into your belly. Every time I do this, students are like, wow, I feel so much calmer. I'm like, good, do that. Set an alarm on your phone so that you remember to do it 3 or 4 or 10 times a day. 2 or 3 breaths a day, your stress level's gonna come down, but you've got to be intentional about it. So mindfulness is a significant component. Gratitude. This is another one of my favorite resources. This was actually created by my friend Scott Colby. His website is sayitwithgratitude.com. And this is literally a deck, whoops, that I just dropped all over my floor, of cards that have questions on them, much like the images that are there. I start all of my classes and tutoring sessions. Sorry, this one was saying, name 3 things you love or appreciate about someone you don't get along with.
Good one.
Okay, these are great conversation starters with your kids. And here's why gratitude is so important. Most of what you end up being grateful for isn't about you. It's about something outside of you, whether it's, I appreciate that my husband went to work and worked with clients today because that's going to help contribute to the family finances. Or I appreciate that my dad took a piece of furniture to Goodwill because that's a resource for me. It's something, again, outside of me. Or, in many families saying grace before dinner, like thanking the farmers who grew the wheat that is now in the bread that you're consuming. If you're a carnivore, thanking the animal who gave its life for you to be able to have dinner. Those kinds of things, right? It shows you, it expands your brain to things beyond yourself. So gratitude can be an incredibly powerful tool towards that growth mindset. And I honestly think that the most important underlying component to achieving a growth mindset and supporting our kids in developing growth mindsets is connection, having community around us. Because let me tell you something, even though this is something I obviously get passionate about, I'm not perfect. I don't keep it all the time. I have my down times. I have my days where I'm like, everything sucks and I'm done. tired of being an entrepreneur because my numbers don't look good. I just want to go back to a full-time job and let somebody else pay me for my 40 or my 60 or whatever, right? I'm done. But I have a community around me where I know I can reach out to people and be like, okay, I'm having a tough day. I need you to help lift me up. So what I want you to keep in mind, no matter what, is you're not alone unless you let yourself stay alone. So the more that you can do to connect with other people who are navigating the things that you're navigating, the better positive mindset and growth mindset you're going to be able to attain. So, you know, as moms or, you know, folks in the village, Elisabeth, Deborah, and I all have Facebook groups that are complementary to each other that support families with different aspects. Elisabeth is a goddess among mortals, in my opinion, because she taught middle school for how long? Way longer than I would have lasted, I'll tell you that much.
Most of my 25 years.
There you go. Deborah's Awesome Mom Tribe focuses specifically on moms with teenage daughters. My group, Parent Tween Connection, is kind of runs the gamut. We support folks with all kinds of different things. Find connection, find support, and lean on that support no matter what. So this is how y'all can connect with me. You may recognize that dude on the right-hand side there. He's here on the call with us. That's my daddy-o and my children. In case I didn't mention it, for those of you who don't know, I'm actually not a mom, but I've got what I lack in depth with individual kids, I certainly make up for in breadth over the last 20 some odd years. So as far as freebies, feel free to join me in the group if you'd like, or I am also a coach. I focus on helping families improve their connection and look at some of the foundations of how to connect with each other, whether it's parents to kids, partners, that kind of deal. So got the link there. But overall, I'm really thankful for all of you joining us, and I'm going to open it up for Q&A. Yeah, Dad, thanks for showing up. Thanks for being here for my clarinet recital again.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Thanks so much, Clarissa. You know, it's such good information. It is, and hearing it again, today is like, it's just, you know, you keep making connections and you keep reminding yourself and keep thinking, how can I work that in, and where am I failing to work it in, and how can I go back and look at it again?
I find it, I said this yesterday, I find it so interesting that we as people with individual differentiated careers are all in the same intersecting area here with this conversation about teenagers and tweenagers. I just find it so interesting that it overlaps like that so perfectly.
Oh, must be good stuff then, must be true, right? We all believe it.
That's right. Absolutely.
Awesome. All right. Well, we'll stick around for Q&A for anybody who would like, and we will definitely be sending links to the recordings within the next week. So stay tuned.
Thank you so much for coming, people. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Lynn, I'm guessing and trusting that you're still there. Thank you for showing up. Denise, yep. I know the trying to do homework while you're trying to do something else. Hope that worked. Love your earphones, Lynn. Those are awesome.
Oh, those are so cute.
Thank you.
Ears on top. That's awesome.
I just saw them.
Cool.
Thank you all. It was really great. I'm so glad I saw the email today and just was like, oh, that's why they wanted to do this.
Awesome. And where are you, Lynn?
I am in the Bay Area,
okay.
North of where Elisabeth is.
Cool.
Again, that's the San Francisco Bay Area. Just
I know this now.
Yes, not the Tampa Bay.
For the context.
Well, wait, I realized the three of us, so Elisabeth is in California, I'm in Colorado, and Deborah's out in Connecticut. We have the C states covered. And then I was like, oh, and I've lived in all of them. So, all right.
I'm sitting here looking at the difference in color between when I started and now, because the sun has gone down. So it's getting dark here. We're about to hit that storm. We're supposed to get 1.5 feet tomorrow.
Oh my goodness. Of snow, you mean?
Better than me.
What's that? What is that called?
SNOEW.
What does that look like?
What is that?
It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas.
We got it last night, so you can have it.
Oh, you did? How much did you get?
I'm in north of Indianapolis, so we got about 5 inches, but my family in Chicago got like 7 to 10.
Wow.
So
yeah, that's what we're expecting tomorrow, which reminds me I better go raise my windshield wipers up.
All right, ladies, thank you so much for all of the information. It was fabulous and gave me a lot to think about, and confirming some of the things I'm already doing and giving me some different perspectives of things that I haven't thought of. So thanks so much and have a great evening.
Thanks, Anna. Thanks for being here.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very
Bye.
much.
Lynn, did you have any questions? Nope. Lynn is out and gone, and there we go. 1, 2, 3.